qualitative research. Uh, uh, Bu, Bu Clarissa, saya manggil Bu Clarissa, Dr. Clarissa, would you like to speak in Indonesian or English?
Kalau misalnya karena saya belajar tentang research dalam bahasa Inggris, jadi kalau memberikan kuliah dalam bahasa Indonesia kayaknya bakal belepotan karena saya nggak biasa pakai research terminologi di dalam bahasa Indonesia. Jadi mohon maaf.
Boleh, boleh, Bu
Clarissa. Tapi kalau misalnya ada yang bisa bantu translate, ya boleh juga.
Boleh campur aja, Dr. Clarissa. Jika
ya, mungkin
termnya sulit dalam bahasa Indonesia, boleh dalam bahasa Inggris. Nanti kami bantu, di sini banyak translator, banyak. Tenang aja. Sebenarnya mahasiswa juga sudah biasa juga mengikuti guest lecture dari luar. Jadi boleh Dr. Clarissa mau menyampaikan bahasa Inggris. Jika ingin bahasa Indonesia, jika ingin dicampur boleh juga ya. Untuk nyamannya Dr. Clarissa saja. Ya. Baik, teman-teman semua. Kita sekarang masuk ke topik kedua yang akan diberikan oleh Dr. Clarissa dari Dr. Catherine Clarissa RN yang akan menyampaikan topik grounded theory in clinical nursing research. Please welcome Dr. Clarissa. Silahkan, Dr. Clarissa.
Pertama-tama ini ya senang banget dapat undangan. Kemarin itu kita ketemu dengan Ibu Windy dan Ibu Yuyun di Newcastle. Jadi saya senang banget ketemu rekan-rekan dari Indonesia. Untuk background-nya, saya dulu kuliah S1-nya di UI. Saya angkatan 2002.
Oh, di
kemudian,
UI?
Iya, saya di UI. Kemudian saya kuliah MSc di Edinburgh, terus lanjut PhD sekarang. Jadi saya bekerja di sana sebagai dosen. Jadi waktu saya untuk dua hari dalam seminggu itu saya bekerja sebagai research fellow di research project tentang young adults after stroke, developing psychosocial rehab for young adults after stroke and brain injury in general. Nah, untuk topik hari ini saya diminta untuk sharing ilmu mengenai grounded theory. Untuk grounded theory saya menggunakan metodologi ini waktu saya PhD. Jadi ini adalah sharing ilmu ya. Okay, so can everyone see my slide?
Yes.
And hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So although when I received the invite, it was about grounded theory in clinical nursing research, but I kind of tweak it in social research because nursing research is sort of under social research anyway, and I will speak about that and explain a bit. Just before we start, to give acknowledgement to my colleagues, Dr. Susan Keane and Lisa Afiles, because I adapted their slides for this session. Okay. So this is the learning objectives of the session. So after the session, hopefully all of us will be able to discuss the fundamentals of grounded theory and its characteristics. And we'll also critically examine the philosophical underpinnings. So it will be quite philosophical, and because it's really important to determine which grounded theory approach that we would like to select in our social research. So we will touch on some of the philosophical assumptions of different types of grounded theory. And we will also identify and discuss key considerations, strategies, and practices for utilizing grounded theory in social research contexts. So to start off, as I mentioned earlier, nursing research is fundamentally a branch of social research, because we know that in nursing, we don't really only discuss the biological aspects of health and care, but we also address the social, cultural, and psychosocial factors, and how they influence our patients or individuals' health and well-being. So the goal of social research is to understand people within their social context, which Professor Henny has already touched on in her session. So thinking about how we understand individuals within their social context. And all of us probably, before we start our research, is always thinking like it's like a big task in this image. So especially selecting what kind of research methodology for our social or nursing research that is appropriate for our research question. So sometimes in my experience, students tend to come to me saying that, oh, I want to do this type of research. So they start off by already selecting, I want to do, I don't know, mixed method study. I want to do a phenomenologist study, but actually it's not the right start. So we need to step back, and I will explain later about the philosophical assumptions, how our positions in this life and our reflexivity, it really plays a role and in how we select our research methodology. So that's kind of a little bit aspect of it. And we know that qualitative research is quite prominent in nursing research, because we know that healthcare is quite complex. So we face challenges like different patient morbidity, again, social cultural factors, staffing issues, impact of technologies, and so on. So these complexities require a broad range of research designs to address various research questions. And this is where qualitative research often comes in, because qualitative research can provide valuable insights into the human experiences. Again, that's what Prof. Henny has already touched on earlier. And again, we want to conduct research and this evidence generated from qualitative research to inform better healthcare practices. So this is what I meant by we need to step back rather than selecting the methodology as a start or type of research design as a start. So we should start from uncovering our philosophical assumptions. So again, this might be a bit philosophical again. So philosophical assumptions, what does it mean? So it includes, if you're familiar with ontology, epistemology, so ontology is the nature of reality, and whereas the epistemology is the philosophy of knowledge, how the knowledge is generated. So positionality and reflexivity are very, very essential for uncovering our philosophical assumptions. This is because they both help us as researchers to remain conscious of our own identities, our beliefs, our values, and how these attributes shape how researchers influence our methodological choices. This will include study design, how we collect our data, how we analyze it, and how we interpret it. And again, I kind of listened in the background earlier. Professor Henny already mentioned that as qualitative researchers, we are the vehicle. So we are embedded in our research conduct. So we can separate ourselves as researchers when we're doing our research. So to make it simple, in other words, positionality and reflexivity contribute to kind of a deeper and more nuanced understanding of the research topic. So it will benefit both us as researchers when we look at our data and how we interpret our data, and also when we kind of report our findings, and then the audience, the readers of our publications or our reports or thesis or and so on. So they will know how to interpret their findings as well. Because we already know sort of this is the lens that I'm using as a researcher when conducting this research project. So the audience, the reader, will be able to see the findings from that lens. So if you move to the right hand side, the picture here. So hang on. So the picture here. So we know that we have so many different schools of philosophy, and again, each school of thoughts, they have their own assumptions, like back to ontology and epistemology, and then also what constitute values. What is that in the research they're conducting? So we see here is kind of, this is oversimplifying. So constructivist, realist, and also real and positivist there. So this is kind of just three main school of thoughts, but actually in reality, so when you go to any textbooks around philosophical understandings of research, you might find kind of more complicated like this. So this image illustrates how research methodologies, so here kind of examples of different methodologies, how they are aligned with the ontologies and epistemologies. Again, I'm not going to discuss everything here, but just want to show you where ground theory sits. So it's kind of in between the realist and the idealist. So it needs to, so the point of these slides, rather than interpreting everything, is quite busy here. So make sure when you conduct your research, it's really aligned with your ontological and epistemological positions. Yeah. So moving on to grounded theory. So what is grounded theory actually? Because we know that it's quite popular in qualitative research. So grounded theory is a research methodology focused on developing theories directly from data, rather than compared to quantitative research that may be testing hypothesis or testing existing theories. So if we see here, Flick points out ground theory's main goal is to create new theories based on empirical analysis. So this can be from our observations in data collection, or maybe from interviews, focus groups, and other type of data collection. So it's different from other research methodologies because grounded theory doesn't start with a set of hypotheses or any framework. So the theories themselves emerge as researchers collect their data and then start analyzing, identifying patterns and meanings in the data. So understanding this difference is really important, not only for those of you who wanted to do grounded theory, and probably for those who are already who are qualitative researchers. Maybe you were asked to peer review a paper that claim they are grounded theory, because and this is the reality. When I go to the literature, I read some papers, some researchers, they claim to do a grounded theory study, but actually they lack of its core features. We will have a discussion what type of features that should be included in grounded theory. So being clear of the characteristics of grounded theory, it's helpful for us to think about what is grounded theory, and then is it really, really applied in this particular study. So Sharma's is also a big name in grounded theory, constructivist grounded theory. So she explains that grounded theory is a flexible and interactive method for studying real-world processes. So it involves comparing and iterating on data to build theories. What does it mean? It means that we go back and forth. So we go to collect our data, we go analysis, and then we collect the data again when we go back to do the analysis. So this kind of iterative process keeps researchers engaged with both the data and then the developing ideas through the analysis. And on the other hand, they here, this quote argues that there isn't a single unified definition of grounded theories with strict guidelines. So again, I think this quote is really, really spot on in terms of what we found grounded theory studies published out there, because it might be interpreted in various ways. So Gibson and Harris here kind of summarize what grounded theory is. So it's a method used to generate theory based on data. So it's data driven. The aims is to develop practical and useful theories that are closely connected to the specific field being studied. So this is what it is called middle range theory. So in grounded theory, we speak a lot about a middle range theory. So middle range theory is grounded in data, is very relevant to the setting that we're studying. So this approach builds theory from the perspectives of people working in that area or the setting as they address the challenges. So the goal of ground theory is to explain what is actually happening in the research setting that we're looking at in the field of a human, again, within their social context. So to summarize kind of the characteristics of grounded theory, so what is it? The aim is theory development. So we want to develop theory rather than starting with a framework. So this is what I mentioned, that we talk a lot about in grounded theory about substantive theory, formal theory, and then mid-range theory and grand theory. So mid-range theory is a type of theory that kind of strikes a balance between being broad enough, so kind of abstract enough, and to be applied to other situations, but specific enough to be tested and applied in a particular context. So the middle range theory generated from a grounded theory study should sit at that level. In terms of formal theory, so that's the example of social theory, the big one, but we are kind of developing theories, so probably rather than confusing people here. So the middle range theory that I really want you to pay attention to, because that's kind of the level of the theory that we're generating from grounded theory. So in terms of inductive and abductive approach, this is what we will need to do in when doing grounded theory research. So inductive reasoning is in theory development means that starting from data, so bottoms up, so we allow patterns, categories, or themes, whatever terminology that you use, to emerge naturally from data rather than we kind of start off again with a particular theory or framework. Abductive approach, I will discuss it later, but this is really, really important, how we kind of, when the logical inference that we need to use when we're generating the middle range theory, but we will have another slide later. But hopefully this slide will give you ideas of what are the main characteristics of grounded theory. So talking about grounded theory is not legit if we don't discuss the founding fathers of grounded theory. So for those probably already kind of exploring grounded theory literature, you will notice these big two names, so Barney Glaser and Anselm Strauss. So I put here a little bit information of their biographies. Why? Because this is important, how they bring, again, going back to my first slides, what their philosophical assumptions. So for example, Barney Glaser, so he was a quantitative researcher. So he brought this quantitative tradition in his work, and how he's kind of influencing the classic grounded theory. I will have another slide later on to show you, but in this slide, I want to show how the values of researchers will influence how they conduct their research. Similarly, so Strauss here, so Strauss is also working together. He worked together with Glaser when kind of publishing the discovery of grounded theory. But as you can see here, Strauss was more a qualitative researcher. So later on, when we discussed a different type of grounded theory, so we could see how that kind of influence how the philosophical underpinnings of their approach of grounded theory. So these are the key publications of grounded theory, kind of the classics of grounded theory. So the second one, so this is kind of the key textbook. If you ever wanted to do a grounded theory study, I would strongly suggest to read this, so you know where it's coming from. So it's not really a thick book, quite interesting to read, I would say, but the book was kind of developed based on their previous work, so awareness of dying and time for dying and status passage. So if you want to explore, but this is the key one that you, if you really wanted to do grounded theory study. And it's also important to actually acknowledge the missing founder, because again, when you read research textbooks, you wouldn't really notice Jean Quint there. So this is something that we need to be proud of, because Jean is a nurse, was a nurse, sorry. So just to acknowledge, actually, she was also part of the work of Glaser and Strauss, although she was often being omitted in any type of textbooks. So we can see here the role of Quint, on the other hand, has only recently become more widely acknowledged when grounded theory methods, so GTM. So if you read grounded theory textbooks published by Bryant, so he preferred using this terminology. So that's kind of the missing founder. So we're already kind of reaching the third generation, actually, but from the work of Strauss, Glaser and Strauss, and with Jan included, so branches of grounded theory developed. So we call that a second generation of grounded theories. So we see here like Juliet Corbin, Katie Sharmas, Janice Morse, Barbara Bowers, and Phyllis Norger Stern, and Adele Clark. So that's kind of how grounded theory from the original version developed into different branches. So probably this chart will show better how kind of the branches of grounded theory. So as I mentioned earlier, the key textbooks from the discovery of grounded theory, it kind of branch out into Straussian grounded theory and Glaserian grounded theory. So again, going back to their philosophical assumptions, I have the slide later on to show difference that it makes in their kind of the philosophical underpinnings of different type of GT. So this is the grounded theory that I did for my PhD. So I used the constructivist grounded theory. So if you're thinking to do constructivist grounded theory, Sharmas is the key author that you want to read their work on. So we also have this situational analysis. So it's Clark's work. So if you see here, we are kind of in the third generation of grounded theory. So if you can have a look on the slide later on, I will share it with the colleagues, so you can start exploring which one actually that would be suitable. Again, going back to your own philosophical assumptions and how that can answer your research questions. So what is actually the difference between different types of grounded theories? So going back again to philosophical assumptions, the variations are based on their epistemological orientations. So Glaser and Strauss, their first work is actually very, very positivist and in the form of naive realism. So naive realism is the philosophical view that the world is perceived exactly as it is. So you see, so I believe what I see. So that kind of to make it simple. So based on this perspective, objects exist independently of our perception. So in other words, we assume that our senses provide a direct understanding of reality. So we use our senses. So that's kind of positivism. So for quantitative research, it's either sits between positivist and post-positivism. So I'll move on to the post-positivism here. So Glaser kind of kept working on the classic Glaserian grounded theory, so still using the same philosophical stance of positivism in the form of naive realism, whereas Strauss and Corbin using post-positivism. So post-positivism shared the same assumption about an independent reality as positivism, but accepts that theories, values, experiences, so they already acknowledge the researcher's values, experiences, and perspective, which will influence how they observe and how they interpret their data. So to give you a bit of context, maybe, so randomized control trials, so the philosophical underpinning of that is post-positivist, because we know that now that if we use the checklist to assess the quality of the quality of randomized controlled trials, we know that there are parts that we need to assess the biases of the study. So it's kind of showing how the acknowledgement of the researchers' values, experiences, and perspectives in that sense. So Sharma's, as I mentioned, is constructivism. So constructivism is different from constructionism. So constructivism is an epistemological position asserting that all knowledge is both socially and individually constructed and interpreted. So when we're interacting with people in our social life, so we're constructing reality. So that's kind of the lens that I used in my grounded theory study. So that's why we use qualitative methods, qualitative data collection methods to investigate whatever phenomena that we are interested in. Clark, the type of ground theory is called the situational analysis. So the philosophical underpinning behind it is postmodernism. So it's kind of the newer positions is kind of in this 20th century that acknowledge the cultural movement. So as a reaction to the modern world. So I'm not going to talk about what is postmodernism here, but just to give you ideas how each type of grounded theory has different philosophical understanding. So again, Glaser, when we read this short biography, because he was a quantitative researcher, so he argued that grounded theory can be used for quantitative research. So that kind of shows how our values influence our research conduct. So here are just the list of literature or key textbooks and articles that you can read if you want to develop your grounded theory study in your own research. Yeah, so, but I'll share the slides later. So this slide is it's quite busy, but just to show the key components and strategies and principle and practice of grounded theory. So the first part here, a spiral, the key component spiral of data collection, coding, analysis, writing, design, theoretical categorization, and data collection. So to make it simple, this means that the process is iterative. So we tend to go back and forth. So it's not kind of a linear process. So after this step, I go to this step. So it's not like that. We go back and forth. So researchers collect data, analyze it, and then refine the ideas from the emerging data. And then they might go back to the field again to collect data when they said that, okay, I don't understand about this yet. So that's kind of showing the simultaneous collection of an analysis of data, which further guide the exploration and theory development. So one important principle here is the sensitizing concepts. So it is broad ideas, starting points that help researchers focus on important aspects of the data without having rigid definitions. So keeping your minds open. So what we will find in the field. So without having like, okay, I'm going to find this in the field. So it's quite different compared to quantitative research or the realism perspective that I showed the diagram earlier. So the comparative methods here is also very important. So the constant comparative methods is very, very particular to grounded theory. So we, as researchers, we continuously compare cases and data to the theoretical categories that kind of emerge from our data analysis. So it's kind of related to what I mentioned about the simultaneous collection and analysis of data. So theoretical sampling, I'm going to skip this for now because I have another slide for that. And this sample size is also related to the theoretical sampling, which I have another data, but I have another slides for that. And memo writing is very, very crucial in any type of qualitative research, but it's particularly important in grounded theory studies because it's kind of a tool as well for data analysis. So yes, so codes emerge from data, not imposed a priori. It means that we don't kind of start off that I want to reveal this. So we need to keep it open what the data tells us. So purposive sampling, for those who are already conducting qualitative research, we know that it's always, we want to sample in, we want to recruit our participants that can help us to answer our research questions. So we purposefully sample our participants. So it's the same principle in ground theory, but I want to highlight the terminology theoretical sampling. It's actually coined by Glaser and Strauss in their key work in the discovery of ground theory, which has been used in qualitative research literature widely. So what is it? What is actually theoretical sampling? So it goes further actually from just selecting data specifically to refine categories and their relationships. But the key here is to build the theory. So it's an ongoing process in grounded theory. Again, this is why in the diagram here, so you can see it's going back and forth because data collection is simultaneous data collection and analysis will help researchers to shape the evolving theory and reach the core category or the middle range theory development there. So reflecting on my own PhD, because when reading the literature, when you're kind of a novice researcher, you didn't really know much, and then you read that, oh, if you do grounded theory, you need to be a tabula rasa. So it's a Latin word for blank slate. So it means that researchers should approach their research without any prior knowledge. So I'm afraid this is a myth in grounded theory, and I will explain why. Because while it's important to remain open to the data and let the theory develop from it, but us as researchers, we can use our existing knowledge, experience, and then the literature that we have read before to guide our research, and even helpful when we're developing to sensitize the concepts, and then when we're developing theory. So if we can kind of pay attention on this. So again, if you're doing a grounded theory, when you think like, oh, I don't need to read the literature, so that's absolutely myth. So you can still read the literature. And the idea of grounded theory, and of course, it's always data-driven. So we don't have the theory or framework as a start, and we need to avoid preconceived theories or our assumptions to prevent bias. But actually, Glaser and Strauss, although they argue researchers, they already mentioned that researchers aren't blank slates because it's so difficult to remove our memory, like our experiences. So it's impossible. But they reminds us, so they here reminds us that researchers should keep an open mind. So rather than kind of trying to erase all the memory and the knowledge that I have experiences, but keep an open mind, but also draw on their existing knowledge to analyze the data effectively. Again, remember, as qualitative researchers, we are the vehicle, we are embedded in our research project. So this balanced approach allows researchers to stay open to find new findings while still making sense of the data. So we need to balance that out. So Sharma also argues that while a thorough literature review is important to establish credibility and inform the research, it should not restrict the development of grounded theory. So what does that mean? So as researchers, we don't kind of being dictated with the literature that we've read, but we use that knowledge to sensitize ourselves to possible patterns, but keeping our mind open to new insights from the data. So the surprise element that we will find from the data, we need to keep it in our mind. So the literature review itself can set the stage for the research without limiting the emerging theory, and should not be just a rigid summary of existing work. So to give you an example, in my PhD, I did a systematic review at the beginning. If I believe 100% of that myth, that I couldn't really be, I need to start with a blank slate. So it's not possible for me to conduct a systematic review. But actually that systematic review really helped me. The findings really helped me to know what is actually missing out there in the literature. So I found a research gap, and it really helped me when after I collected my data and analyzed my data, to understand what is actually happening there and which kind of theoretical concepts that I wanted to explore more. So talking about research questions is also very interesting in grounded theory, because it's not set in stone, which means that the research questions is actually just a starting point, and the data, because it's a data-driven methodology, so the data will guide the development of the theory. So we need to keep our questions open in order to allow the theory to evolve based on what emerged from the data. So again, to give you examples, I started off my PhD with the research questions related to the experiences of patients and then the staff on early mobilization with mechanically ventilated patients. And where the data leads me, it's more towards the staff experiences. Well, I have limitations in terms of it was so difficult for me to recruit patient experiences, but the way that it works, my interview guides were developed based on the previous data collection, and then the subsequent data collection, the research, the interview questions were different. It was kind of adjusted based on what I found from the previous data collection. So it is challenging. So it's not saying that it's easy. So as a grounded theories, based on my experience, we should maintain this flexibility with external expectations. What does it mean? It means that I had the limitations of time limit, so I couldn't do this forever. So I really needed to strike the balance between, okay, what findings I had at this point, and then what kind of theory and concepts I can link to that to build my middle range theory. So because the difficulties would be because it's data driven, so we will have so many avenues which route that we want to take, but again, we can kind of reshape and refine our research question based on the emerging data. So that's what I wanted to highlight here. So all is data is always claimed by Glaser. Again, it's good in a way because it's promoting an open-minded, flexible approach. So we are kind of having the surprise element, as I mentioned earlier. But Flick's here critique highlights his critique highlights the importance of data collection methods in grounded theory. So researchers need structured methods to collect data, although grounded theory itself, the methodology does not have any prescription of what is the specific data collection. So he also argues that not everything can be data. So not everything can be data, as Glaser has said, but almost everything that helps answer the research questions can be seen as data. So we use kind of our research question as a guide when we look at the data, because we will have so many different things that might be what we might hear from our participants, what we observe in the field. So Flick encourages using a variety of methods. So it doesn't need to be only interviews or, I don't know, focus groups, but we can use everything. So interviews, observation, and even policy, reading policies, document analysis, so we can use it in grounded theory. So again, this debate highlights that while grounded theory is about staying flexible on open data, we always need to have careful planning and strategically use the appropriate methods, because we don't have the luxury to conduct a research forever, because that's kind of the minefield when conducting grounded theory, because you have so many avenues which one depending on which one that you want to pursue. So for data analysis, this is kind of the key components of what data analysis and grounded theory. So coding and categorizing data, memo-writing, as I mentioned earlier. So coding and categorizing data is to identify key themes and concepts. So and while writing memos is to record our ideas and insights wherever the stage of our research conduct. So for example, before conducting interviews with my participants, I did my memo. After I finished my interviews, I did my memo again. And when I was in the middle of analyzing my data, I recorded my memo again. So when kind of based on my experience, it was really helpful to go back to your previous memos that you wrote, so you could see how your ideas were developed throughout the course of your research. So that's why it's so important, because memo writing is part of your data analysis. So you analyze it as you go, because it's, again, the simultaneous data analysis and collection in grounded theory. And developing a core category. So core category is kind of the category that ties together the findings. So it's kind of sits at a more abstract level. So it's not really granular anymore, but it needs the title or the label that we give of our categories. It needs to reflect different aspects of the findings. So saturation of concept or categories. Ensuring saturations of concepts or categories is to confirm completeness of the data analysis, because as I mentioned again and again, because we have different pathways that we can go. So there's always different lens of concepts out there that we can kind of use to illuminate our findings. So we need to make that informed decision. So which data that is already saturated, that was already very, very clear, that's showing this particular concept. So the last one is constant comparison. So we use constant comparison. So we always compare the data between so different settings. So again, reflecting on my own studies, so I compared my data between different type of staff professionals. I compared the data between different settings from the first hospital and the second hospital. So I used that to refine my categories and how my data was connected to the emerging theory. So these steps together will ensure how our analysis remain rigorous, flexible, and grounded in data, which is really, really important in the grounded theory study. So theorizing is really, really the hardest part based on experience. So because this is the part that we as researchers, we need to think abstractly, and then it's really hard to let go the nitty-gritty, the detail of the data that we have collected. So but we need to move from holding our granular data and then move on to what is it theoretically from our data. So again, this involves abduction. So abduction, I have another slide later. It's also one part. When I did my PhD, it was really giving me headache to think about abduction. But once you already in the process, so you know that, so abduction, that really helps me when theorizing. So theoretical sampling is guided by the emerging theory, meaning that us as researcher adjust the data that what we collect based on the developing theory. So this is kind of the nice part of actually doing grounded theory. We can be flexible because when we kind of already analyze the initial data, and then we see that, okay, I think it's going to this way, and then we can kind of adjust our data collection. So we can talk to people that might give more insights to us around the developing ideas or concepts. So it's the flexibility that I really enjoyed in my own study. And the process of coding is not only organizing the data, it's quite different from just kind of doing thematic analysis, but because the constant comparison, as I mentioned, that's the element that we really need to compare again. What is the codes, I don't know, from the nursing professionals and how that compared to the other professionals, for example, from physios, reflecting on my own study. So how the data, how the codes were connected, or maybe not, what were the differences? So this kind of the constant comparison that helped to refine the theory that was being built. So in short, grounded theory is very dynamic and very, very flexible. So it, again, the theory, the developing theory that will guide us how we make decisions in every stage of our research conduct. So theorizing is a process. It's not something that you can just sit down and then you found like, aha, this is the theory. So it's just so many creative thinking here. Actually, I was kind of getting more ideas and insights when I was doing mundane things like cleaning my flat and taking showers. So that's kind of the creative element, the beauty of theorizing. So theorizing is a dynamic process. It's more beyond only analyzing the data. So it's asking questions. What is actually happening here? Making connections, again, using the constant comparison and exploring possibilities, because you will find kind of theories out there that might illuminate this aspect of your data, but you will need to stay true to your data. Which part of the data is kind of more showing the theoretical saturation, because you can potentially use different theories, social theories out there that can help kind of make this connection between your mid-range theory and with the formal theory. So when you theorize, you go deep into specific experiences, we examine the details, but we also kind of keep our mind still open to abstract concepts, looking at the bigger picture. So that probably is easier to see. So the process involves moving back and forth, again, with the constant comparison between the specific data and the broader perspectives. It takes a while for doing this. So a lot of reading, a lot of thinking, a lot of walking outside just to get the insights of what actually the theory that coming out from the data. So to make it probably easier, it's just like when you kind of trying to solve a puzzle. So when your data, your granular data is kind of the small pieces of the puzzle, but in order to develop a theory, you need to figure out how they fit together and what is actually showing from those puzzles when you put them together. So yeah, so the Urquhart, here, so this is really important, especially for those who probably is now doing the master's degree and then thinking about the doctoral level of study. This is really important because we always want that level of study that will link between the emerging theory with the existing theory in the field, because we want to develop the body of knowledge. So it's about building our findings into the wider academic conversation. So if you go to Google Scholar, so you see standing on the shoulder of the giant. So that is what you really want to aim, especially in doctoral study, is not only reporting the findings or the themes, but how that can be connected to the wider theories, the broader academic conversation. Okay. So abduction, this is the fun part. So Charles Peirce, so he was a pioneering American philosopher. So his work was around pragmatism. So pragmatism here is really closely linked to abduction. So what abduction really is kind of pragmatic tool. Pragmatic in a way, it needs to solve the problems in our world. So the philosophical position of Peirce. So what we want to develop from knowledge, it needs to lead to useful real world outcomes. So abduction here is really important because, again, it's very different from testing existing theories or a hypothesis. So it's kind of a pragmatic tool to discover new ideas. So we're kind of, how about this? How about that? So in order to have meaningful practical implications. So here, the quote saying that it's easy to be certain. Only one has only to be sufficiently vague. So my interpretation of this quote, so if someone says this idea is definitely true, but they don't provide kind of clear reasoning or evidence why this is definitely true, it's easy to sound certain. So when something, this is definitely true. So if someone confidently say that, so we might believe it. But if they were to explain in detail what they believe, challenges, contradictions might arise. So they might kind of oversimplify the understanding. So again, it's quite difficult to give to explain abduction until you kind of, when you do your research and then you get that aha moment. So probably that's the easiest way to explain. But it's the creative thinking that you have. Okay, actually they're talking about this. This is related to this big concept. So that's kind of the nice part of doing research, actually. So this is my last slide, sort of, just to wrap it up. Grounded theory is quite unique in terms of the methodology among other research methodologies, because the main goal is to develop theories directly from empirical data to explain phenomena of our interest. So as highlighted by Flick here, is it's not about testing as existing theories, but allowing the data to guide us to lead where it ends, to shape the development of new theories using the abduction way. So according to Atkinson here, Atkinson, if you're doing ethnography, so a lot of ethnography literature was written by him. So grounded theory should not be seen as a rigid analytical technique, but it's a flexible approach to productive research, because again, we're developing new theories, talking, remember what I mentioned about peers, we want to solve real world problems, because the middle range theory developed from the data is really, really relevant to specific context. So while Glaser and Strauss provided methods, and so consider them as guidelines rather than strict rules. So allow your creativity in how new ideas and theories are generated from data. And these are, when I mentioned earlier, when I started, my colleagues Suzanne Keen and Lisette, so we are kind of constructive with grounded theories. Yeah, so if you're thinking to do a PhD in our department in nursing studies, and then you wanted to do grounded theory, you definitely can be supervised by one of us because our work is around grounded theory. And I also have a couple of slides of the list of references. It's quite a lot, but probably start off by the first one slide that I presented earlier about the this kind of starting point, but feel free to have a look later. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Let me just stop sharing. Masih mute, mute, mute.
Prof Yani masih di mute. Prof
Prof,
Yan masih di
mute,
mute.
Prof. Sorry. Let's give big applause to Dr. Clarissa. Thank you for your insightful talk about grounded theory, Dr. Clarissa. Mungkin saya sekarang akan menggunakan bahasa Indonesia. Barangkali masih ada mungkin 3 pertanyaan untuk Prof. Heni dan untuk Dr. Clarissa. Saya mengerti ada beberapa pertanyaan di chat Zoom, tapi saya ingin memberikan kesempatan dulu bagi yang ingin bertanya secara langsung. Mohon disebutkan pada siapa pertanyaan ditujukan dan nama dari yang ingin mengajukan pertanyaan. Silahkan. Nanti bahasa Indonesia boleh, Pak?
Assalamualaikum, boleh?
Boleh.
Assalamualaikum.
Eh,
Salam.
Kok nggak kelihatan ya, Pak? Siapa Pak yang bertanya?
Muhammad Arsyad, Bu.
Oh, Pak Muhammad Arsyad. Saya nggak kelihatan nih.
Hah?
eh Ininya boleh nggak eh,
Saya
nah
sudah ada.
begitu. Pak Muhammad Arsyad, pertanyaan ditujukan kepada siapa?
Clarissa,
Singkat,
ya. Ini
jelas, Pak.
Clarissa.
Baik,
Oke,
kepada Dokter Clarissa, jelas.
oke, Dr. Clarissa, nice meeting you. How are you?
Ya, kabar baik.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a faculty member of Binawan University in Indonesia, and it's like that we have the same, Dr. You, Dr. Professor Yani, Professor Henny, and myself. All of us grounded there in our dissertation. Yes, my master. I went for my master, and then I used grounded theory also, Glycerian grounded theory, and my PhD also grounded theory, Charmas grounded constructivism. Yeah, I have opportunity to meet Kati Charmas at Sonoma University, State University in California before. I attend her has workshop before she passed away.
Yeah.
One thing I still remember that she said that in constructive grounded theory, the result doesn't always come out with theory or model. Instead, deep understanding or what is called extensive, comprehensive understanding can become out with the constructive is grounded theory. This is not question, but what do you think? You agree with that or not? The
Yes.
first question. Wait. Let me go on with the second question. I have used. I'm also qualitative researcher. I have used any 7 qualitative data software. I mean data management software, Maxda, Atlas T, NPPO, Transana, RKDA. But based on my experience, I found that manual data analysis is the best. Yeah. And then also, you say that you graduate from University of Indonesia. I went for my bachelor and graduate. I went in 1997. Are you born or not yet? Okay, this is not question. This is not question, but I just want to. So I want we are the same boat. We are the same boat because until now I'm confusing that we all agree that grounded theory always come with what Professor Henny said, come out with model or theory. But again, when I attend, it was in 2014. Yeah, 2000, I attend the Kati Charmas workshop in California, and then she said that. I still remember that. Okay, what do you think? This is not my question. I just want we all at the same boat. Thank you, Prof. Yani, and Clarissa. Bye for now. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I absolutely agree that it's quite difficult to just to be prescriptive in terms of, okay, when you read your part of your data and then you thought that, okay, this is really aligned with this concept, because you can't force your data to fit any concept. I know that I mentioned that you will need to connect it with kind of the wider literature in order to contribute to knowledge, because that's what we're doing in research. But we need to acknowledge like what we found in the reality, so might not be covered with one specific concept. So it's really okay to use more than one concept or formal theories to explain your data. And then if it doesn't fit certain aspects of the formal theories or concepts, we can just acknowledge it and we can discuss it. So that's kind of the beauty of research, because the purpose of grounded theory is not kind of finding data to confirm any specific formal theory, but it's kind of more expanding, I would say, giving more insights into what is actually happening in certain contexts. Because again, we sit at the middle range theory. It needs to be so it's very grounded in the data, so it's relevant to the settings, the research settings that we collect our data from. And then when we use concept to illuminate our data, we explain which part probably are aligned, which part are not so aligned, and maybe we can use other concepts to explain different parts of our data that might not be aligned with this particular one concept. So I absolutely agree, because again, we never know what we have. Again, all is not data, but data that we observe, that we collected, they might be useful to build the theory. I think the theoretical sampling, the theoretical saturation will be our go-to, because again, I experienced that in my PhD. It was very alluring when you read one concept and then, oh, probably this is the concept, but having kind of dialogue with your supervisors, with your colleagues, is kind of to keep questioning, is it really that, is it really true? Is that happening in your data? Because again, you're kind of so embedded in the data, so you might want to have someone else to interrogate, like keep questioning, because that's what Sharma's also said, like keep questioning, have this internal dialogue with our data. Is it really true? Is this really the connections? And always that kind of creative thinking and ideas, which is quite exciting in grounded theory, I think. I think the second question was about the software management. So for those here who will probably have their Viva or their defense and presenting, be mindful, never, ever, ever say that the software analyze my data. Remember, you as qualitative researchers, you are the tool, so it's your brain. So what you mentioned, you want to do it, if you're more comfortable doing
you
it
agree with
manually,
me.
go for it, because
You
you're the
agree
tool,
with
you're
me.
the
I
brain.
agree with you. Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay,
It's
thank you,
only
thank you,
for
thank you.
managing the data,
That's right.
because
Data
that's
management.
why that software helps in kind of just managing the data. But the thinking process is always us. So, yeah.
It's true.
Prof. Yani, may I add?
Yeah, please, Prof. Henny. Thank you,
Okay,
Dr. Clarissa. Thank you, Pak Arsyad. Terima kasih.
okay.
Silakan, Prof.
Thank
Henny.
you, Prof.
Ya, terima kasih Prof. Yani. Pak Arsad pertanyaannya. Saya ngasih komentar aja ya, karena kita berempat sama nih. Kita menggunakan, I did a grounded theory when I took PhD, right? And I use the classical, so the original Glasser and Strauss. So because when I read and also different type of the grounded theory, different approach and different objective also. So based on my my when I read the grounded theory, Charmas, constructivism, and also Strauss and Corbin, it is different with Glasser and Strauss, the original grounded theory. Ya, saya menggunakan grounded theory yang original yang memang objektif daripada menggunakan Glasser and Strauss GT itu adalah develop teori, sehingga memang pada akhirnya adalah saya mengembangkan, ya alhamdulillah berhasil membuat middle rank of theory, substantive of theory ya. Nah, memang kalau Charmas sama Strauss and Corbin tidak pada akhirnya itu yang seperti yang disampaikan oleh Pak Arsad, tidak membuat teori, tapi bagaimana kita bisa memahami experience gitu ya, lebih dalam lagi. Tapi ya itu tadi, kalau bisa dibilang, jadi mana yang katakanlah GT yang menurut kita yang kita bisa pilih yang baik itu ya depend on perspektif kita dan depend on aiming kita melakukan tujuan penelitiannya tadi ya, riset problem, riset questionnya itu seperti apa sih gitu ya. Artinya nanti saya di awal akan menggunakan Strauss and Corbin, tapi pada saat ujian proposal banyak masukan dengan fenomena masalah yang memang saya dapatkan ongoing proses, ya akhirnya saya berubah. Saya menggunakan Glasser and Strauss yang apa namanya yang original seperti itu gitu ya. Jadi sepakat gitu dengan Dokter Clarissa juga, ya itu tadi keunikan penelitian kualitatif itu kita nggak bisa karena kita juga menjadi apa instrumen, menjadi tool gitu ya. Kalau tadi dikatakan bahwa mana apa namanya seperti Enviable software itu just only ya manual membantu kita gitu, tapi ya tetap ya kalau saya lebih prefer menggunakan manual tematik analisis, rasanya lebih apa kita bisa lebih masuk gitu loh. Artinya kita masuk memahami apa yang terjadi ke social world-nya partisipan, menemukan code, kategori, konsep itu yang betul-betul memang apa namanya exhausted gitu ya, tapi ya eh, apa namanya sangat menarik gitu ya, apa namanya melakukan penelitian dengan menggunakan grounded theory walaupun memang hektik gitu ya, Peter Clarissa. Pengalamannya hektik banget tapi ya enjoy banget gitu. Itu barangkali apa namanya Pak Arsad ya, jadi komen jadi apapun ya memang ya depend on kita gitu ya, karena memang tergantung apa namanya approach gitu yang kita ambil gitu ya, yang kita pilih yang mana yang memang aimingnya berbeda gitu, seperti itu
Baik,
Thank you,
Baik,
Prof. Thank
kalau
you.
terima
ya.
kasih.
kalau misalnya
Terima kasih.
bisa saya tambahkan juga, constructivist grounded theory kita develop middle range juga loh, Bu.
Iya, ya.
Ya
Semua
Soalnya
sebetulnya grounded
kita
theory
stay,
bisa menghasilkan.
karena abductive
Iya,
reasoningnya itu di situ.
Iya.
iya.
Ketika kita menggunakan abductive reasoning, itu kita move to kind of abstract level. Jadi bisa
Ternyata
untuk
saya
develop middle range theory. Kalau
ternyata
kita stay cuma di experience aja, itu masih di inductive
ya
proses. Jadi kalau misalnya ada yang claim di research paper mereka cuma bilang, oh ini kita this is the core category, tapi mereka nggak relate to the concept, itu berarti nggak stay
belum
true.
selesai belum
susah,
selesai
susah.
Grounded
belum
theories
final.
characteristics ya.
Baik,
Itu
ya.
belum nyampe
Belum
sebenarnya
sampai ya.
masih
Ibu
kurang.
Clarissa,
Iya.
Ibu Clarissa, ternyata kita sama. Saya PhD saya itu disertasi saya konstruktivis
Sama
grounded
Prof
juga.
Yani juga
Ya.
sama.
Baiklah.
Konstruktivis.
Baiklah, terima
Ya,
kasih
lanjut.
Dr. Clarissa, terima kasih Mbak Prof. Henny, Pak Muhammad Arsyad, terima kasih. We should apologize. Waktu sudah eh, waktu kita terbatas, lalu kita sudah sampai kepada jam 17. Namun saya ingin satu pertanyaan yang singkat, barangkali bisa dijawab kurang dari 5 menit. Barangkali eh, barangkali ada teman-teman yang ingin bertanya. Silahkan.
Itu yang ada di chat tuh Prof ya.
Yang yang ada di chat mungkin
Itu pertanyaannya ke
sebentar.
saya ya.
Ya. Ada yang
Baik,
ingin disampaikan secara lisan sebelum di chat? Baiklah, kalau tidak ada, mungkin mangga Prof. Hendy dijawab langsung yang di chat. Mohon
baik.
maaf, mohon disampaikan jawabannya kurang dari 5 menit, Prof. Hendy.
Oke, baik ini
Terima
apa namanya? Ini
kasih.
Kang Nandar ya. Kang Nandar bertanya, penelitiannya menggunakan mixed method. Terus sudah bertanya apa namanya dengan menggunakan data kuantitatif. Apakah boleh pertanyaannya ditanyakan lagi dengan menggunakan kualitatif? Jadi kalau boleh saya bilang depend on kita mau mengeksplornya seperti apa gitu ya. Tentu pada konteks penelitian kuantitatif apa aiming kita apa namanya dengan ya mungkin dengan simple question gitu ya answernya. Nah tentu nanti tujuan kita nanti tahapan katakan mengeksplor lagi bisa saja dengan menggunakan katakanlah bukan pertanyaan yang sama, tapi fokus pertanyaannya sama. Hanya nanti bagaimana karena kita sebagai peneliti untuk mengeksplor apa yang akan kita eksplor, yang akan kita ketahui, ya tentu itu pendekatannya nanti pertanyaannya jadi berbeda gitu loh. Tapi fokusnya sama gitu loh Kang Nandar. Intinya sih seperti itu. Jadi bisa dielaborate gitu ya nanti. Ya katakanlah karena memang sekarang kalau saya boleh bilang apa namanya akan lebih bagus kita tuh menggunakan penelitian. Kalau saya sekarang mindsetnya udah tidak pure kualitatif tapi mixed method, jadi menggunakan dua metode kuan dan kual gitu ya, seperti itu akan lebih komprehensif. Artinya kita melakukan apa sesuatu gitu ya, melakukan penelitian yang sifatnya bisa mendapatkan apa namanya potret picture yang lebih komprehensif seperti itu.
Terima kasih untuk Prof. Henny. Terima kasih pada Pak Nanda juga yang sudah bertanya. Mohon maaf, kita akan
Punten,
akhiri.
Mbak Propian mungkin nanti kalau bagi mahasiswa yang mau bertanya, mangga nanti japri
Iya,
saya atau
nanti
ketemu
di
di kampus,
Japri Prof Heni
boleh
ya.
nanti apa kita diskus ya. Mohon
Ya,
nggak bisa dijawab sekarang.
ya. Eh, berhubung waktunya sangat terbatas ya, untuk to conclude this very interesting webinar series ya, teman-teman semuanya, bahwa kita tadi sudah mendiskusikan tentang grounded theory. Prof. Eni menjelaskan bagaimana penelitian grounded theory ini bisa memberikan understanding yang lebih holistik pada kasus-kasus pediatrik dan sehingga pada akhirnya bisa mengembangkan perawatan juga yang lebih holistik. Sementara Dr. Clarissa lebih menjelaskan lebih detail grounded theory dengan perkembangan grounded theory dan philosophical underpinning dari grounded theory tersebut dan sudah menjelaskan dengan detail kepada kita, mungkin bisa menambah wawasan kita dan menekankan kembali bahwa penelitian grounded theory itu pada dasarnya bertujuan untuk apakah itu developing theory, constructing theory, baik metodenya mau memang baik itu grounded theory pada Glasser dan Strauss atau sudah bergeser ke Sarma sebagai constructivism ya. Pada tujuannya apa memang semua pada level 3 pasti pada akhirnya akan constructing theory, baik itu theoretical explanation atau tadi ya developing theory seperti yang disampaikan oleh para narasumber. Terima kasih kepada narasumber yang sangat membanggakan untuk hari ini dan memberikan begitu very detail informasi mengenai grounded theory. Kepada partisipan yang sudah sangat antusiastik mulai dari jam 3 sampai jam 5, alhamdulillah terima kasih semuanya. Dan pada akhirnya saya akan menyerahkan waktunya kepada Ibu Kaprodi, Ibu Hartia Harun. Saya kembalikan ini lagi kelas kelas postgraduate, baik magister ataupun S3, saya kembalikan
Ya,
Bu Hartia. Mangga.
mungkin sebelum terima kasih banyak Prof. Yani, Prof. Heni, kemudian Ibu Dr. Clarissa. Perkenalkan saya Hartia Harun. Tadi belum sempat menyapa pas pertama kali ketemu. Jadi on behalf of the Dean of the Faculty of Nursing Unpad, allow me to convey the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Clarissa and also to Prof. Heni. Maybe I will give the certificate to Dr. Clarissa. Please kindly accept the copy of the certificate, and the real one will be sent to you by email. Yeah. And then for Prof. Heni, give a moment, please. Nah, new share, hang on. Wow. Sebentar. Satu lagi, Prof. Heni. Oke. Share screen. Oke. Terima kasih banyak untuk semuanya. Thank you for
Thank you.
Terima kasih
especially
Dr. Hartia.
Ibu Profesor Heni and also Dr. Clarissa.
Clarissa, thank you.
For the very interesting also important talk for today, and terima kasih untuk semua mahasiswa dan juga peserta dari luar atas partisipasinya pada acara yang sangat bermakna untuk siang ini. Terima kasih Ibu Moderator. Bravo selalu, sehat selalu kita semua. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you Dr. Clarissa, thank you Prof. Heni.
Terima kasih Dr.
semua.
Clarissa.